You're listening to the Lou Stokes Podcast. Real and inspiring conversations with individuals from all over the world, sharing their insights on sustainability, fashion, conscious consumerism, and empowerment. Be inspired to take action and be the change you want to see in the world. Welcome to the Lou Stokes Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking to Lauren Fay. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Super happy to be here. Great to chat with you.
Likewise, I'm really excited for us to have this chat. So I'd love you to just tell us more about yourself. Give us a little bit of background into what you do and your passion for sustainability.
Sure, happy to. So I transitioned into this space, some might say pivoted with my career about 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. I had been doing IT consulting and a few other things. At one point, I actually did have a startup magazine, an ill-fated one in 2008 in San Diego, but that's maybe another conversation, another podcast. But I had always been tangential to fashion. I grew up in New York. I grew up in Manhattan. I had a lot of friends who worked in the industry. So they were buyers, they were, designers, they were photographers, fair bit on the editorial side, some friends who were models. So really, all the different aspects of the industry I'd had some sort of secondhand insight into and really loved it. I don't really believe in regrets because I believe in lessons and the journey and all of those things. But I went to school at Brown for undergrad and I didn't take classes at RISD. And that is, I would say, a regret. So when I reached this point about 6 years ago, I was looking to start a family. And as we were having those discussions, it really felt I just wanted to align what I believed in with what I was doing. And I wasn't working for an unethical company, but I was doing IT consulting for finance companies. And I had a couple of meetings where I had an out-of-body experience where I was looking at myself in this meeting thinking, quite literally, what am I doing?
Wow.
Really, I just didn't feel connected at all to to the work. And I'm friendly with, I just chatted with that former CEO not too long ago. And I actually have a friend who just joined the company. So it wasn't any sort of reflection on them. And I like to say that because it was a great place to work for a few years, but I wanted to go back to school. So that seemed to be the sign, I'm going to look at sustainability MBA programs. I had a lot of friends who'd studied environmental science in school. Mm-hmm. So, I thought, okay, maybe I'll go for those hard skills. And I looked at those programs and they were super heavy lifts. they're very expensive here in the US, a lot of time commitment. Mm-hmm. And again, to set the sort of stage of wanting to start a family, it just seemed like not the time. So I found FIT's program. FIT has a master's certificate program and really a ton of secondary, professional education. There's a few other schools in New York that have it as well, but FIT really has just from kind of the tonal approach, they're sort of a very hands-on kind of doer fashion school,
right?
Given that sort of qualification, and they were great. They had great flexibility. They had a great program, and I started taking those courses for a certificate for sustainable design entrepreneurship. So, and through those courses, I met some mentors that I'm still friendly with. This woman, Tara St. James, who's phenomenal. She's based in Canada. She taught at FIT and Pratt and Parsons and just other incredible instructors. I met a woman named Jessica Schreiber who runs Fab Scrab, which is still very active in New York. So I started to learn about the landscape and I found this group called Fashion Revolution, which is based out of the UK.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah.
And through the networking that I was doing with that class, I met what was then the head of the US, and this woman, gentleman, Shivam, and I got the opportunity to take over as the US director. So he basically passed the baton. That was a position that he'd had for a bit, but he was also running a brand. And it just seemed like the right time. And I was ready to step up into that kind of a position. Mm-hmm. So I had this really masterclass in what was then sort of green fashion and being plugged into this network of people who'd been working in the space for 20 plus years.
Right.
They were academics, they were nonprofits, there were brands. And it was a very event-based kind of role. So we did, they do open source education.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was really, I was using a lot of my entrepreneurial set of sales skills in the sense that they don't actually fund their chapters. So I was also hustling to fund these events and sort of figure a lot of it out as I went, which was incredible. It really was a masterclass. So through that work, I started to hone in on what I was interested in. And I was really interested in the future of leadership and academia. And so I wound up starting my own nonprofit because, again, holding everything up, I ultimately reached a bit of a burnout with that.
Yeah.
I thought, if I'm going to be doing this, I want to have control over the programming. And I was very interested in bringing together academics and professors and grad students. So I started it. It's a very long answer. I'm going to be mindful of that.
That's okay.
Trying to get into the present a little bit. So the nonprofit that I started was called the New Fashion Initiative, and we ran it for a couple of years. We did, we brought environmental science programs, sustainable MBA programs, and design schools together. So again, all these sort of siloed molders of the future leaders of fashion. So the professors in all of those different departments. And we also had businesses. So we were funded by Eileen Fisher.
Oh, amazing.
We also lucky to receive some funding from Avery Dennison and Friends and Family. And so that program was really fantastic. It was essentially, we called it a consortium. It was a bit of a think tank. It was one day of bringing folks together. We did it, the first time that we did it in the Eileen Fisher location in Irvington, and got a great feedback loop from everybody we included. We had some amazing brands. There's a brand, Studio 189, which may be on your radar. They produce in Ghana. They're phenomenal. Abrima is fantastic. Abrima Urwaya. And we're just incredible professors. So we had Parsons, we had FIT, we had NYU, we had Brown, because I have a connection in there from, being an alum and also just being active in there with their environmental science head. So it's now an institute. It was actually the first environmental science program in the US.
Oh, wow.
And now, and now it's a big institute. So it's kind of a stalwart for Brown's programming. There's definitely a big environmental push in that at that school. So so that program, though, kind of ran its course in terms of hitting up against a wall with COVID and funding. And one thing I didn't realize when I very confidently at the time, set off to start a 501c3 is just how much of your time you spend fundraising.
Right.
It's all of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're like, the people who run small, I have so much respect for executive directors of small nonprofits, because they're doing the programming, they're doing the marketing, and they're doing the funding. And the first, it's why so many of them really don't make it past 2 or 3 years. And I was one of those. I did not make it beyond COVID. And throughout, I've been doing consulting, and the consulting work was really getting referred in because I have the sales biz dev skills. Ironically, I have them, but they didn't work so well for me with fundraising. Go figure. That's maybe also another conversation for another day. It's like philanthropic fundraising is its own ball of wax.
Yeah.
A lot. It's very different. And I think particularly when you're building programming, for me, there was also a lot of what exactly are we doing? What is going to work? What's going to get traction? And, I've seen, I've learned a lot. I learned a ton through that experience. But throughout that, I was supplementing my work with consulting and sort of getting referred into projects and helping. I got brought in to help a pitch, which ultimately didn't turn into a project, but a pitch for a really big box retailer on their returns. So we were going to try to use the nonprofit that I had, which, was a 501c3. And a number of companies do this, where they essentially leverage the nonprofit. It sounds unethical, but really what it is the tax write-off for the company to be able to then power essentially the back end or the logistical piece of handling the stuff. Because with textiles and fashion, the cost of any kind of end of life program is the touching and the sorting of those goods.
Right.
So a lot of brands are looking to offset those costs. Most brands are not putting, you've got your outliers are Worn Wear and Eileen Fisher Renew.
Yeah.
Those are programs that have been funded by those brands for 5, 10 years in some cases. I think Patagonia just reported profit earlier this year, recently. So those are rare that brands will fund it. So anyway, so we did this large pitch to this big box retailer, which was, I had no idea. I knew that things were burned because I had seen, the Burberry report that came out a number of summers ago.
Right.
But I didn't realize what volume was being thrown out in landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So literally the on the P&L sheet of this large big box retailer was the cost of the trucks to go to the landfill. And anything that wasn't new with tags was being landfilled. Full stop. Which to me was just terrifying. So that was about 4 years ago. And so my work since in consulting has been for recyclers, for resellers, and for a little bit of, I'm familiar with the repair, landscape, which I fully in and use myself and all of that. So very long answer to your question.
That's okay, thank you.
I think that brings us
journey.
It brings us to where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, throughout this time that you've been in the sustainable fashion textile landscape, what do you think are the key mindset shifts that not just companies but individuals need to be, shifting or changing to truly embrace what sustainability really is?
I mean, I think it's as simple and as complicated as scarcity mindset. So that's something I've personally, I've looked at in my journey of life and the idea of things coming from love instead of fear. So,
right.
Clothing is our armor. It is to a large degree, especially for us who've been involved in the fashion industry, it's a lot of our identity. We are wearing, in many ways, our proverbial hearts on our sleeves in terms of trying to, well, maybe not that transparently, right? We're trying to project an image.
Right.
But we are coming with a lot of vulnerability into stores and into potentially, shopping experiences where we are, our ego is vulnerable, and I think brands can either sort of support that or manipulate that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's a lot of overproduction that's happening. And the fact that the way that the whole structure is set up, the way the P&Ls are set up for there to just to be waste every year, every collection. I was reading a recent article of just the volume of products that some luxury brands are sitting on year after year, literally billions of dollars of product, which of course, I mean, those are retail prices. So those are inflated costs. But there's a very real, human aspect to people who've made that, the leather, the animals who've made the leather, the time that it's taken to make those goods. And the fact that because of brand equity and market share and all these constructs that those goods would be destroyed is just, it's horrendous. Like, that's horrible. So, and I don't know how much, money these huge conglomerates need. So I don't know. That was a little bit disjointed of an answer, but to say that on an individual level, I think we don't need that much stuff. So for me, I've been on that journey as well the last, 6 years since I started this. I did a year when I first started working in sustainable fashion. I did a year without shopping.
Nice. Yeah.
Which if you'd asked me, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have thought that possible. and it totally rewired my brain,
In what way?
I have a very different reaction when I go into stores. When I went into stores in the past, I would almost have a feverish need. I thought it was sort of a need.
Yeah.
To get something, right. and actually, particularly in luxury stores, sometimes I would be embarrassed if I left without buying something, which is really interesting. And as though I was being judged, right, for not, being able to afford or being a part of,
Yeah,
or, you know,
absolutely. Yeah, I know that feeling.
So yeah.
Yeah.
And now I can window shop. And I also have a much more critical eye. I mean, I think I worked in vintage shops. I worked in one in college, and I can see the quality, you know, the difference in, you know, in seams, in jackets, when you can see that something's been cut for, you know, for movement, you know, that actually when things used to be modeled on bodies and you know, reiterated multiple times. And so just really good tailoring, really good construction, seeing that quality. Handbags, for example, how they were made. I mean, I have a couple of handbags. I started collecting vintage handbags years ago, and I downsized that collection in the spirit of part of my, like, my next step in not buying was also now minimalism. So I now have much more of a
Less
capsule
more.
wardrobe. Yeah. And it also makes it easier with kids to get dressed. I just have, you know, limited options, which, I mean, I have some fun dress up stuff, but for the most part, it's pretty simple, which I also really like. I mean, I have fun with accessories, but the clothing is pretty straightforward. But I think, and I can appreciate, it's sort of like, I mean, it really unplugged things like, you know, envy. Like, I can look at something and be like, oh, that's not for, you know, I don't know. There's a very big, I don't know that I'd credit it all to that 1 year of shopping. I think that was the beginning of the journey of the last few years.
Right.
You know, learning more about how much is wasted, also still definitely informed, because I couldn't believe that company, you know, functioned the way that it functioned. And then also that they were given a viable option to try to mitigate it, and they didn't jump at the chance. There was just a lot of bureaucracy. It didn't move forward. And I had shifted onto a new project. So I didn't, you know, and I didn't have the main contact. It wasn't sort of my account, so I didn't push it. And that was hard, you know. It's hard. It's I don't know. For me, I just want to live in the way that reflects my values. So I do love clothing, but I mostly shop secondhand.
Yeah.
I mostly shop, you know, mostly new with tags secondhand, but I shop the real. I have a couple of brands that I buy, you know, standards from. I'm a big Levi's fan, so those are my jeans typically. Yeah. But yeah, I've simplified it, and I also don't shop. I shopped as a hobby in the past, and I've really stopped doing that. So yeah.
I mean, it's quite an amazing feeling actually when you don't feel that need to buy something when you walk in a store. It's kind of like, what's the word? It's like freeing, because you're just like, yeah, it's nice. That's nice what you're looking at, whatever. You can appreciate the beauty of it, because after all, fashion, you know, it's aesthetics, isn't it? It's beauty, and it's kind of this creative art form, like very individual to each person. But it's kind of that nice feeling of going, yeah, that's really nice, but I don't actually need it.
Yeah. It's detachment. You know, it's like you can have, that's the word that I would put to it. Again, you can totally have the appreciation and the respect, but I also can go into stores and see, well, that's like that's a high poly blend dress. Are you kidding that you want $1,200 for that? Like your markup must be insane.
Right.
Because the other thing about, you know, to go back to sort of luxury and the some of the pretense within that. I mean, there's a whole section of luxury that is truly luxurious craftsmanship. And to me, so that's craftsmanship. That's those skilled artisans being treated well, paid well. And again, coming from love, in the sort of larger sense of you know, respect and good conditions. And then you have, you know, poly blend dresses that are made in probably some of the same factories as a lot of what they would call lower end brands. Yeah. And they just have a different label put on them, and they want, you know, X amount of money. And so the other sort of filter that I have for shopping is I buy really mostly natural fabrics. I've actually made that transition to all my workout gear as well. So so cotton, you know, wear cotton sports bras, and, you know, I mean, there's a little bit of a blend, but they're technically recyclable. Right. although we can talk about that, how that's, you know, still in a bit of a Pinocchio phase, recycling. But yeah, for me, it's also really appreciating what I have. So you know, yeah, I just don't feel it's, I think that's also, I've started, for me, again, this is going to go into the woo-woo territory, but I meditate daily, and that's something that has made a huge difference in my life. And, you know, I think that's something that often fashion can exploit, right? If you have a bit of a hole, or if you're feeling anxious about something, the whole construct of retail therapy, is really pretty twisted and a bit dark.
Yeah, and also it's like, I think about, you know, social media and how people are sitting at home scrolling, and you can just buy anything on a click. Like your bank details or your credit card or whatever are already on your phone or whatever. So it's like that easy to just go click. And so a lot of that marketing is, you know, playing into our emotions and our desires. And I think that is a lot where all this hyper consumerism comes from as well, is that it's so easy to access, and you could be at home having like a dark night of the soul, you know, going and you literally are like shopping online because it's that easy, thinking that will make you feel better, when really it has like the sugar, I call it the sugar hit. So you know, you get something new, you have it, you wear it a couple of times, and then it kind of loses its, you know, spark, and you're like, oh yeah, it's all right, and then you've had it for a few years and you don't even really think about it, you know. So it's a lot about valuing our clothes. We don't value the clothes that we wear.
No, and in a way, how could we, right? Because if it's coming from that place and that sort of decision center, then it kind of makes sense that we wouldn't, you know, we wouldn't love it, we wouldn't value it. It might even remind us on some subconscious level of that, like, dark, you know, that dark night.
Yeah.
I also am not on social media. So, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, but I went off of Instagram, and I will, you know, freely admit, and in some ways happily admit, that I'm not on TikTok. In a lot of ways that might be not having, you know, I'm not getting informed, right? So there was part of me that struggled with that, because it was, you know, should I really know on a visceral level and complete level what's happening there? And then I just thought no, because I also know my wiring, and I have enough compulsiveness where it's not good for me to have those options. So you know, LinkedIn for me at least has kind of different guardrails, so it feels a bit of a safer space. Although some might argue, you know, to what extent that's true, but yeah, it is. I mean, that's also the direction that I think a lot of things are going. I mean, TikTok is for a generation, for a certain, you know, age group, that's where they're doing the bulk of their shopping. I mean, the numbers, the numbers that I see of that creator economy are just remarkable. And I do think that's coming to disrupt the whole industry. So you know, hopefully what we can do is empower those people to do that with, you know, with dead stock and made to order and 3D printing and, you know, some of the new ways of making that aren't, you know, that we just don't apply the old framework to the new paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about like this whole overproduction and over consuming. It's much more of a conscious, like producing in a more conscious way, and also consuming more consciously. Like, yeah, it's interesting because a lot of Gen Z, they're like, I see this kind of, there's two sides to that generation. There's some that are very environmentally, you know, aware and conscious, and then there's this other side that I see that, you know, are doing the shopping hauls and like Shein and that kind of like hyper fast fashion. So I find it quite fascinating how there's like these two kind of, there's a divide in that generation.
I'll jump in. I just want to say, I mean, though I have a lot of empathy in a way for that, and I don't want this to come off as ageist, but I feel like I was a total hypocrite in my
Oh, yeah.
20s too. Like some of it is also like, some of it's also, they're young,
Yeah.
right? So I have a lot of, I sort of see that issue in the round, and I don't, in a way, and I don't, again, I'm trying not for this to sound like pejorative, because but there's nothing new, right? That is sort of the way that it's been. There's different versions of that probably for every generation.
Yeah, of course.
But the challenge, the difference is, it's not on them, it's on Shein, who's making this volume and feeding that in this way that is really unconscionable and really, like, from both a labor perspective and and regardless of what materials you use. I mean, they use a dead stock partner called Queen of Raw. I know the founder of that company. She's fantastic, Stephanie Benedetto. That's a great resource, but you plug it into, again, this framework that is this just this force that I just don't think is a force for good. You can't kind of retrofit. And again, when I do circularity, is one of those things where a couple generations ago, circularity was really, you have less stuff. Everyone has essentially capsule wardrobes. Everybody has, a suit, a dress, or maybe 3 dresses, different seasons. Most of them were made by someone in the family, kind of thing. I mean, that's going back maybe 3-4 generations. But, the whole idea of fast fashion, which is new, and Zara and then H&M and Victoria's Secret, and some folks ran with it and expanded it. But that's really where the responsibility lies for Gen Z, who has grown up on social media and has been, they exist on that platform, and they exist in this. I have a ton of, again, empathy for, I can't imagine going through high school with any of that, or college with any of that. I mean, I'm so glad that, those years for me were not recorded or photographed. So, what a gift. And so they have a lot of challenges. So I don't, I don't want to put any of this sort of at their feet, because I feel like it's hard enough to figure out who you are and what you want and all of those things. And again, they're just being bombarded with messaging.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just saw LinkedIn just started a new, it's incorporating videos more. And I'm like, I don't want videos.
No, I don't either. I don't want videos. Short reel. No,
I do. I will say one thing I do. I do like to look for bloopers on YouTube. So I do occasionally engage with bloopers, but I really I definitely am more, if there's a continuum. I'm not a total Luddite, but I like movies, and I still have DVDs. Maybe I am a total Luddite. I still have, not DVDs, I have CDs.
Yeah.
I don't have DVDs. But, I'm also a little bit ADHD, so I'm not on medication for it, but the way that all this programming is, it's making everyone's brains more ADHD.
Oh yeah.
So add that to the mix of these kids who are trying to, make decisions, and, you can have convictions and then still be a hypocrite.
Oh, absolutely.
All humans do that, and define hypocrite and put that in context, and also try to live from a place. I try to, try not to judge, but the big conglomerate brands, I do judge them, because they are, they're making insane money off of this. And doesn't matter what nonprofits they fund. It doesn't matter what initiatives they have. It doesn't matter what awards they do. They are perpetuating the system of fast fashion that is, eating just unheard of resources. And it just, and it's taken a huge leap forward with Shein. That's, it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think, Lauren, about, so for example, Zara's just started this resale platform in some European countries, and a lot of different fast fashion brands are, adopting more circular strategies. What's your opinion on that? Because I think about it and I think to myself, how can a fast fashion brand Like, why would they be are they introducing this as like to just tick a box, or is this a way of slowing down production of new clothes? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I can give a high level response. I haven't been into a Zara. So I want to qualify my answer by saying I haven't been into a Zara and like looked at the clothing for a while,
Mm-hmm.
probably like 2 or 3 years. So next time I'm in, we probably have one in Seattle. I should probably find one. But to actually see the initiative and the project, in real time, I think would qualify me more to give the answer. But my instinct is to say, I think there are phenomenal people who work within those companies, and I'm sure and they've been hired. The fact that there is somebody hired to do a circular initiative is something.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it's being used as a feedback loop for production,
Mm-hmm.
for the product people, for the designers to see what makes it through to resale, right? So
yeah.
Because I've done, when I did shop H&M and other brands, I won H&M sweater that lasted like 8 years. It would have been, what they sourced, the blend that it was, the mill that made it, but it was a button up, heathered, like black and white. I love that sweater. I wore that sweater until it literally started, I re-sewed buttons on it. So that would be really interesting if they start to connect that dot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's design based on what's making it through to this resale program. I don't know that they're doing that. Let's hope that they are.
Right.
I think that it is, I think that legislation is going to force them to, in terms of some of the waste laws.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully those fines are hefty, and enforced. And, it's a big deal. Just the fact that exists is a big deal. I think that's a big sort of
step.
Helps to validate the circular economy in a few different ways,
Mm-hmm.
To a larger audience.
Mm-hmm.
So it introduces them to the concept. I think it also destigmatizes reuse, in a way it's probably really hard to measure. So, but the reality is, to go back to the H&M example, I also bought things from H&M that made it like through 3 washes,
Mm-hmm.
and the seam literally dropped, or the seam was glue, right?
Yeah.
So, I think we've all had those situations. So I think and I don't know whether a seam with H&M specifically was glue, but I've definitely had that experience with shirts. So I don't want to necessarily, I want to qualify that a little bit further, but to say there's a lot of good about, like everything, there's a lot of good about it. And then there's definitely things to be suspicious of. I think, I think the thing is, we are just approaching a point with fast fashion, where, it can't just be growth.
Yeah.
It can't be year after year after year. It's more and more and more. We need to be, basically putting some stops on that to plateau. And, even to start to look at, what does degrowth look like? If we have enough clothing that exists for the next 6 generations.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I've heard anecdotally, then we just don't need, and I don't have the answers of exactly how to implement that, but I just know that to have these public companies that are trying to produce, I have empathy for these CEOs who are trying to give, results quarter over quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's all about revenue and growth, isn't it? It's just comparing to last year and, and the return on investment. And so it must be really difficult. But then I think as well, sustainability is very much about patience and slow. And I feel maybe if they start adopting more sustainable business models and introducing more circular strategies, the first years with these models, maybe they're not going to grow, but then after a certain amount of time, they'll start to see revenue coming in from those models. So
Yeah.
And I understand that it's complex, it's nuanced, and it's difficult to shift that mindset to, you know, balancing in between your profit, planet, and people, right? Because
Yep.
companies are so used to just being profit orientated. But like you said, in the new paradigm, these companies, you know, will not necessarily, you know, do as well, or potentially lose a lot of business because of not adopting new ways of doing business and becoming more conscious and responsible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think actually you pulled that out of what I said and put it very succinctly. It's true. I do think, to go back to your Gen Z comment, you know, I do think as Gen Z has, you know, more disposable income, I do think brands will be rewarded for walking the walk and for doing,
Right.
you know, starting to do these things, and starting to put money in these things and build these programs. So, you know, I do think it's really important that they do. And I also see, I mean, hopefully we get to a point where it's just not, people understand that it's not acceptable or real to have a $5 t-shirt.
Yeah.
There's no way, you know, so many people along that value chain are losing, including us ultimately,
Yeah.
for that to exist. It's the same with, I'm trying to think of which city it is. I think it might be Berlin. There's someone who there's a circular city that has an initiative that's like the true cost of food. So they adjust for, you know, what it's truly costing to source and produce the food, which is what we need. We need a sort of a right sizing with cost in fashion. So nothing, I mean, I don't know whether we can do that with, like, how we do that with carrot or stick. Do we set like minimums for cost?
Right.
Like you can't sell something
For less than. Yeah.
I mean, it goes very against a free market economy. So I'm cognizant of that, like, as I say it. I'm just trying to think out loud about how we mitigate it, because, you know, or we just all collectively decide, like, this it's enough is enough. You can't have, you know, $12 jeans. That's, I mean, the labor intensive, how much water and how much you know, time it takes to make a pair of jeans. It's way more than $12. And nobody needs, the other thing is, on the flip side of that, nobody needs 100 pair of jeans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
yeah,
just as an example. But I think, you know, I think we all, there, from a personal level, it's about kind of honing in on what you, you know, your values and what you believe in. And so for me, I try to just make purchases with that. And I've learned to mend as well, which I find it doesn't look great, but I love it. I actually was I was looking at a co-working space in Seattle earlier this week, which is climate oriented. And we were talking about doing a mending event.
Nice.
With the group. So, and those kinds of things, and Fast Revolution has been doing those sorts of things for years.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of communities that do. But the idea of also going back to the love piece of, like, loving on the things that you have and embracing their imperfections, you know, and hopefully there's less judgment for that too. Like, you know, darn socks are still functional. They still work. Still, you know, get a little bit more use out of them. So I think that creating that and emanating that as an option is good. So
yeah, absolutely. And so, Lauren, what do you know, I know you're passionate about technology. How do you see technology transforming the sustainable fashion space?
So I am, and I think it's there's a lot of interesting tools. So I'm cognizant of how there's the measurement of impact, and then there's actually the operations that go about changing the let's say the sort of the volume or the footprint of the impact. So in other words, you can empower somebody like a Zara or a Shein with all of the data in the world, but if they don't actually lower their, you know, production and their numbers, it's a bit of, you know, or sort of a bit where we were at the beginning.
Right.
We've got some information, although the information potentially could be used for legislation and for more sort of control on certain things. I'm sounding pretty socialist, but I kind of am. A lot of different levels. But so, technology is, let's see, there's some really fascinating, I was talking about 3D printing. I think that's really, really interesting. Yeah, there's a startup called Unspun, which just got some significant funding, and they just started a partnership with Walmart, and they've worked with Pangaea in the past. That's incredibly interesting. The idea of on-demand, made to measure clothing, that's incredibly disruptive. That could be really incredible. I think there also is, this recycling, which the text that we're there from an R&D perspective, but we really don't have the funding yet. So I just saw a post. So there's Evernew is one of the players. There's Evernew, there's Circ, there's Ambercycle, there's Spinova. There's a number of these different players that are doing recycling of various different blends. Some of them are up and running with factories. Some of them are not. In the US, we don't have, we have some cotton and some wool recycling facilities, but we don't have blended. We have small, I think Ambercycle has a really small factory, but nobody's doing anything at anywhere near the scale that's needed for the volume of clothing that we're collecting. So in the US, most of the clothing is being collected and downcycled. Some of it's being resold. If it's being sorted, it's being, it's potentially being resold, and that's going either into domestic market resale or it's going overseas. And which isn't always a bad thing. I think, a lot of it, if it's not sorted and it's just, not manifested, we call it, it's called manifested when you in a huge pallet, when you send it anywhere, that's bad. But technology that helps to track returns, for example, is another thing that's really useful. Just to finish, go back to the piece about the recycling, that needs funding. So I'll just say we really need a tech billionaire to care about textile recycling and to write, one or two of them to write pretty big checks here in the US. That's my ask of the universe, because I know that they can. And then from the returns standpoint, the volume of returns, since I just wrote an article about this actually, which is for a newsletter for this group called the Reverse Logistics Association, which is a great nonprofit here in the US. And having visibility into exactly what is being returned, it is an absolute no man's land. When you go into warehouses, and I've seen facilities, what's going outbound, the new product, those are super automated, really efficient. There's tons of technology, and still the back end bit, the end of, sort of end of life return side of these operations is just a mess comparably. They're still on Excel spreadsheets. They're still trying to figure it out. They don't know what they don't know. Things are getting, I use the analogy kind of hot potatoed, like it's somebody else's problem. I don't know, and this goes back to the larger framework of it's already been written off. Right. So there's been an estimation of what's going to get lost within this process. And so there's not real, and there also isn't ownership. So the article that I wrote about having a chief returns officer, which I think is very much needed. And back to the earlier comment about that person being in direct dialogue with the head of product, all the, so there needs to be that feedback loop of, this is constantly coming back, right? Something's wrong here. Or we don't have any partners who can handle this when it comes back. If there's a take back program, because more and more brands. So I worked at a company called Helpsy for a bit, and they were helping with take back programs, because the take back programs in the US, there are a couple of big brands that are just drowning in product. So it's great that they have, the accountability, and they're setting up those programs, but on a very real level, the goods that come back are not necessarily good enough for their own D2C websites. Right. So for their own sales. So there's a huge percentage of what they get back that they can't sell. And we were helping them solve for that by selling to, for the most part, this cottage economy of resellers that are on Depop, Etsy, TikTok,
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're curating and they're saying, like there's a whole here, and now there's Whatnot, which is a video platform, which is very interesting. And so they're very transparently saying, it's darned here, there's a stain on this shirt, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Still X brand. And so that brand is worth whatever the
XYZ,
perceived
yeah.
value. Exactly. And so they're willing to spend $30 on it. So
interesting.
So that kind of technology for returns is really helpful. I think where it gets a little bit murky is, some of the reporting technology. I'm friendly with a number of CSOs, and they're just drowning in the reporting. So it's hard because we want the accountability and we need the data.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we also need to be making bold operational changes. Yeah. Right. So, if you strip that team and you leave, 3 people on it and they have to do a massive impact report every year, guess what? A lot of their time is going to be spent on that impact report.
Absolutely. Amazing. Thank you for all these comments and your insight. So just one last question. Where do you see the future of fashion going?
I really like the idea of the creator economy, but within the context of community. So the idea of, slowing down and having, just pieces. I can give a utopian version just to qualify. Or do you want me to?
No, absolutely. Like it's a free, where you would want to see it going. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I would love to see some of these large, I'll just say disruption. I'll speak about what I'd like to see from a positive standpoint instead of what I'd like to see sort of taken down and not exist. Just to keep the theme of love versus fear, just to keep that running through the conversation. I would love to see creator economy where there is, real kind of community and creative expression, and even personalization. So there's more connection to what's being made, which hopefully leads to more accountability around what you mentioned, which is really caring about the clothing, which means we're going to love it, we're going to treat it well, hopefully keep it around for longer, get joy in wearing it again and again. So that would be, that's sort of a simple answer, and it's utopian, but I would love, and then, I think, I don't know. Retail is changing. I don't think that e-commerce is going anywhere, but hopefully there's a way to really try to streamline it, make it as effective as possible, and try to, and I think it's going in this direction in general, where we might be living in a post free returns world, which hopefully stop people from buying, and I have relatives who've done this where they buy the 7 pairs of shoes to get the 1 pair of shoes.
Yeah.
That's just slightly irresponsible.
Yeah.
And
I also I think as well with the non-free returns, what's good about that is it actually does make you think twice about what you're ordering online. You're exactly. Well, I can't get 7 pairs of shoes and send 6 back. I have to, or either go to the store and try them on, or just order 1.
Yeah, I still try to do the 24-hour. That's another part of my journey of shopping. I try to wait 24 hours.
Yeah,
and I still really want it.
Yeah.
The thing is, my words have changed. I used to need things, and I would say that, and now there's a very big difference between need and want.
Absolutely.
And so I think when you come from the, wanting, and you've given it thought, then again, to speak to your earlier point of truly being connected, it'll really be something that you love, and hopefully, these are not, I'm co-opting from other people who've said these great phrases, but I think it's Coco Chanel's quote about an old friend or good friend, or clothing is my good. I'm messing up the quote, but that idea of like, when you open your closet, it should feel like, you know, you should feel relief, and there should be like, you know, different, I mean, some of them, sometimes we do need like warrior clothes. So they're like the suits that make you feel bold and stronger for certain things. You know, we all need, I think, that those different modes that we can live in, or shift into, I should say. But it shouldn't be, you know, you open your wardrobe and you know, you're drowning.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Like, clothing just falls on you and you feel stressed every time you look at it.
Yeah. It's like, help.
Totally.
Yeah. And also then you think you've got nothing to wear because you've got so much, it's so disorganized that you're like, I need to buy XYZ because you don't even know what you have. It's basically a vicious cycle.
Because your brain just gets overloaded. Of course it does. You know, it's looking at, you know, 300 options. And so it can't, like, you know, it can't process.
Yeah.
So you kind of give up.
Yeah.
I've definitely been there, and I know it. And I, you know, I don't want to sound so soapboxy, like I have, like I don't ever impulse, but it really is like the brain is elastic, and there is, you know, you can, you know, change it.
Yeah.
The neural ways are changeable. It is possible to kind of, you know, be that change. So I think it's, you know, you don't, things that you want to work on, like they're great. I mean, meditation is a great tool for it. Community is a great tool for it. Having sort of goals of like how you want to change, you know, how you want to change. Right. So for me, like I knew I had a bit of a shopping addiction. And that awareness probably took a little while, and being exposed to this community of all these people who've been working in this space definitely helped me see it. It was a really good mirror to see it. And I thought, okay, what can I do? Maybe something kind of extreme. And I didn't think I could do it. And then I was able to. So that's, I mean, and people do that with, you know, whether it's like races, all these challenges that you can kind of give yourself. And those are great, you know, motivators to push you through to, you know, what you can do. And that feeling carries into, you know, a lot of other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been a pleasure chatting to you today. Please. Amazing. Thank you so much. How can people find you online?
So I am on LinkedIn, Lauren B. Fay, and I have a website, which is bfglab.com.
Okay. Amazing. So I'll put those in the show notes as well. Yeah,
I am no other social.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's enough. Less is more is our motto.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the through lines, right?
Less is more.
Great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please subscribe to the Lou Stokes Podcast. Rate and review in the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're tuning in from. I'd be so grateful. Also, check out the show notes to learn more about my guests and learn more about me on my website, www.loustokes.com. Until next time, be inspired, take action, and be the change you want to see in the world.